This is TWiT.
The chip shortage has become massive. The president is having a summit. 20 top executives from 20 different companies will be assembling at the White House on Monday. I don't know what you can. I mean, it's like
we all agree.
Yeah,
there's a chip shortage.
There's a toilet paper shortage. Let's have a summit. What are you going to do? There's a shortage.
Now, one of the things that insulates Apple, though, is that unlike a lot of the other big manufacturers, Ford, GM, etc., they don't run a lot of their assembly lines in just-in-time format. So most of the factories, they assume that they're going to be able to get the parts whenever they need the parts.
Pre-build a lot before they announce, even.
Exactly. So Apple always has a huge lead time unless the pandemic struck right before when they were getting into components.
TSMC says they're going to come to this shortage summit on Monday. They make the Apple chips, and Apple, to kind of the dismay of other companies, buys up pretty much all of the production, which has helped them up to now. But at some point, you know, the pipeline runs low. I don't think it's merely COVID, though. I'm wondering if this also has to do with just massive increase in use. Internet service providers are now being told that new routers are 60 months off, more than a year off, because the router manufacturers, like Xilinx, can't get the chips to put in the routers. So this seems to me this is a kind of a multi-pronged problem. You're right, Dan, about just in time. A lot of manufacturers just wait until they get the orders, then they order the chips. But if they're not there, that's it. But I think it's also just COVID and a huge ramp up in consumption. More people are using computer hardware and chips than ever before.
And everything has chips in it, right? Like every single thing that you rely on now every day, being at home, routers, computers, smartphones, tablets, cars. I mean, everything has chips in it. And people, you know, a lot of people turn to obviously consumerism in the pandemic to have like a little bit of that, like feeling good about something, right? I'm going to buy a new device, going to buy a new piece of electronics, or I'm just going to upgrade my infrastructure because I'm working from home all the time now. And that has cascaded into, I think, just huge amounts of demand. And, you know, the factories just can't keep up with that.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen at least a 25% boost year over year in the sales of desktops and laptops. And that's just those two segments. Now include all the support equipment that's sold in order to make those work remotely. And yeah, that's not an inconsequential boom.
Well, Denise, Dan, do you have kids? No. Denise, your son is schooling at home, right?
Yes.
So
by
all
choice.
of a sudden, by choice, he could go in?
He could, yeah.
Oh, nice.
His district instituted an all virtual school this year, which he enrolled in. So if he had stayed at his same high school, he would have been back and forth. What does this week look like? What does next week look like all year?
Fun.
So we've had a lot of consistency, and it's been a good fit for him.
But you see this with a lot of families. Suddenly, you know, we needed a computer. Now everybody's mom and dad are working from home. Kids are going to school. Suddenly we need 5 computers, all of them running Zoom, and we need. Oh, by the way, we need more bandwidth now. It's just a cascade of needs all of a sudden thanks to COVID. I mean, it's made these companies very, very, very rich. But it's also
I would like to see at some point an analysis of what the replacement of old routers have done to the vulnerability of the edge on the internet, because we've always talked about how vulnerable some of those older, like especially Linksys routers have been.
Yeah, get ready.
Now that they're getting replaced, is the attack surface decreased? I'd love to see that.
Right. Or in the case of internet service providers not getting replaced because Xilinx can't make enough routers. I mean, the only thing that's going to happen tomorrow at the summit is, I mean, there's nothing they can do about tomorrow or next week or next year. We're talking a couple of years. TSMC has said we're going to spend $100 billion over the next 3 years to build new fabs. That, you know, that'll help in 3 years.
That'll be ready next week. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think they're saying 2025, something like that, for these new fabs.
Does the demand stretch that long too, right? I mean, like by the time they built them and it goes back to more of a normal level, well, I guess we've got all these extra fabs we built.
We'll just have to find new ways to use chips. Of course, that was Intel.
I think we'll do that.
Yeah, maybe that's... I mean, look at who would have thought that GM would have, or Ford would have to stop their truck production because they couldn't get enough microprocessors. You know?
Remember Micron?
Just like Henry Ford imagined.
Yeah, right. Micron, yeah.
Micron built up a brand new factory in Texas because there was a huge demand for memory products. And right about the time that the factory came online, there was a glut and the bottom fell out. And they were forced to sell the factory at a loss. So it's interesting. We're kind of at that. Yes, there's a demand right now, but is that demand going to stretch out for the 3 years it's going to take to build a factory? What do you do if you're TSMC or Intel? Do you ignore it and just say, well, we'll make it? Or do you say, well, we should jump on this because who knows what it's going to be like in 3 years? Intel's building 2 new fabs in Arizona, which is probably smart because they're also betting on geopolitical issues, making it a problem getting chips from China. And chips made in the U.S., that might be more appealing to a lot of American companies coming down the road.
Maybe this is a situation where the government assists these companies to help them ride out those downturns in the economy.
Wow. You know, government's writing a lot of checks these days.
Yeah.
I guess you have to. But wow. Maybe.
I mean, that is a national security issue. If you can't build your high-tech industry, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, especially when China is the other alternative, right? Like when your other major superpower rival is the one who does control a lot of that infrastructure and is building up theirs, you kind of have to put the money where your mouth is.
Well, you got the CEOs of Ford and GM going to this event, and you know they're going to say, what are you going to do to help us? American jobs are at stake. Biden's proposed at least $100 billion to quote, boost U.S. semiconductor production, but that's not going to change anything for years. It's a very interesting conundrum. I'm sure that we will write a check, but it could be a bad check.
A check is just a check.
Yeah.
What do you do with a check? I mean, it's not magic. It's not going to automatically create a factory.
Yeah. It's a really interesting situation. Who would have thought this? You know, this is one of the things I love covering tech over the last few decades is that you try to see the future, but you never do. And who would have thought the internet's biggest problem would have been social media gone awry, or that the biggest problem we would have is so much demand for computers that we could, and cars and everything else, that we couldn't make enough chips to fill them all. Who would have thought that?
You know, right now there is someone. So there's someone in the basement of a financial services company who's writing a new algorithm that is taking into account what a pandemic will do to the economy. A pandemic now increases the tech sector. That's
you just didn't know until then. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like as a sci-fi writer as well, like I feel like that's something that often happens. Like you look at the sci-fi of 50s, right, and it's all about moon colonies and spaceships and space exploration, and really nobody imagining the internet and the hugest like change that was going to come to all of society was basically being interconnected. Far less than people talking about like, oh, well, clearly because we're in the space race right now, we're looking forward and assuming the space race extends decades into the future, if not centuries into the future, when technology basically took a sharp left turn and nobody really anticipated it.
Do you make notes as you're reading the tech news going, oh, I got to put that in the, the galactic Cold War. That's going to be in there.
I think about it, but it's hard, right? Because you're always like, am I throwing a dart at a dartboard that's not even going to be there?
Right.
I wonder if that's inspiring future sci-fi writers. My generation wrote about moon colonies and interstellar exploration. Is there a sci-fi writer right now who's thinking about what the next Twitter is going to look like?
Dan?
That's going to change galactic society.
Not me, but somebody is. Somebody's definitely looking at the next social media because it is interesting. Yeah.
Actually, we've had Rob Reed on the show. He wrote a very prescient book about a Facebook-like entity knowing everything about everything that's going to happen, and actually to the point where it could predict you were going to order a certain beer as you walked into a bar and had it ready for you, when you sat down, or had the ad anyway ready for you when you sat down. So yeah, it's risky though. You're right, because the other side of that is 10 years from now, that sci-fi feels really dated. It's like, that was, clearly he was writing in 1992 because that, nobody cares about that anymore. All right. Well, chip shortage, story number one. We haven't solved the problem. Do you think it's going to get worse before it gets better?
Very much so.
The demand's go anywhere. I mean,
yeah. It's backing up right now. I mean,
I'm actually surprised demand has not plateaued. I would have thought everybody who needed a computer got one by now, and it would have plateaued.
It's not just computers, though, right? Like, it's everything. I mean, cars, like we're talking about, or, every piece of technology that goes in your house, set-top box, game consoles,
Computing
right?
at the
Like,
edge.
all of this stuff.
Yeah, you still can't get a PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X to save your life. Unless you have a teenager at home like I do, and he managed to score one. But he's got lots of time on the internet to figure that out.